On today's episode, we're delighted to have with us Miss Baisali Mohanty. She's a senior UN diplomat, Odissi dancer, and the founder for the Center for Peace and Performing Arts. She's an ICCR empanelled artist and an A-graded Doordarshan performer. As a diplomat, she has served in critical UN missions in conflict ridden areas such as Syria, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. Her work forms a rare bridge between policy and performance. An Oxford alumna, while she was studying there, she set up the Oxford Odissi Centre, a centre to promote Indian classical arts throughout leading UK universities. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Hi Vishali, it is such a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to having a great conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Gauravi, for having me.
So, my first question to you is tell us a little bit about your childhood. What were those experiences like? And did any experience really push you towards dance and becoming a diplomat?
I would say, so my parents and my uncle were a big influence growing up. I come from Puri, which is sort of a small town city in Odisha. So I think predominantly where my friends were given, two options as to medical or engineering as career options, my parents were very much like you decide by yourself when I reached the first board exam. So I think career-wise, I was very much influenced by my uncle, who's also into IR and journalism. So all three of them come from very different background. My father happens to be an IET, but he never was like, "Oh, you have to get into IET or something." So I had the option of then seeing, okay, what am I interested in? And that sort of took me into humanities. So I did science for my um, board exams after 12th. Up till 12th, I took science. But after that, I knew that I have to get into either political science or history or journalism. And the same with dance. I think my mother always wanted me to dance. She put me into dance when I was, what, 2.5, 3.
Wow.
So it was a struggle at that point. Of course, I didn't want to do anything besides just, being a child. She was very strict at that point. And eventually, of course, growing up with dance, it became a part of my life. And thereon, after a point when I decided to continue dance, it was my decision, my choice. But my parents, my gurus, I had a teacher early on who used to come to my place and just literally run around, just to make me sit at one place and,
Wow.
look at her and like pick up the basic steps. So I was naughty in that sense, but I think that's sort of a background. And my parents, my mom herself, she's into poetry, and there's a lot of literature happening in our house. So I think that also shaped my childhood quite a bit and took me in the direction of arts, performing arts, and international relations, so to speak.
So, was there a particular moment when you decided that you wanted to dance, or was it, a cumulative experience because of all those years that you had put into Odissi?
So I think initially, when I was a child, I don't know why kids are asked this question, but people do ask them, "What do you want to become
Yeah.
when you grow?" You know, let's just say that, okay, I want to be a dancer because dance has been the thing that I've been growing up with. And then I want to be a doctor. Now I'm very far from, even being interested in medical. I'm really scared of doctors now. But that was my thing since the beginning. And I feel like there was a point, the way that our academia is, it gets very much exam focused, right? And like other kids, I was also like, okay, I have to get a certain mark percentage, and that will allow me to carry on with my further studies. Of course, we have a cutoff also with the Delhi University and other universities. So there's a point when I had to prioritize studies more. And then dance took a back seat. And it was primarily my 12th board exam, higher secondary. So I feel after that, I realized that how much I miss dancing. And there was no pressure of going anywhere with dance because nobody was asking me. In dance, also, we have our exams, right?
Yeah.
It's also a curriculum that we follow. But it was pretty easy going because everyone was like, yeah, she's doing it pretty well. Let's see where it goes. But with studies, I mean, our routine curriculum of academic, academia, you have a pressure. So I think I missed that part of just doing what I love doing, and I realized my love and my connection with dance, if I may say so. And then eventually, when I moved to Delhi for my college, I decided that, okay, I have to continue this somehow. Because, of course, in the initial days, it was a struggle. I was shifting from science to political science, humanities, as I said before. So I feel then there was this balancing act that I tried intentionally doing.
Yeah.
And I feel that was sort of the point when I decided, I mean, it was just there that I can't do without dancing. And it has to be, part and parcel of my life, no matter what I do otherwise.
And then you carried on this passion for dance even into your masters. At Oxford, you set up the Oxford Odissi Center. What was that process like? How did this idea occur to you? And I just wanted to understand what more can universities and even schools do to promote culture here in India?
Yeah, I think that was the first organization that I set up in my life. So I think that's very special. I did not have an agenda going to Oxford that I would set up a student led body. Being in Oxford itself was kind of overwhelming. I didn't have it in me that, okay, I am going to get through Oxford. It was a surprise and a beautiful one. So I think when I went there, as I said, I think prior to that, I had it in me that I have to continue dancing by myself. Going there, of course, there were things happening around Indian arts, but there was not some. There was nothing specific happening on, say, performing arts, Indian classical dance and music. And Odissi is the form that I do. So Odissi, as we move out of our country, we see a lot. I mean, there's something or the other happening with Bharatanatyam and Kathak. I'm talking 10 years back, right? But Odissi is a little behind in that sense. So I realized that there's something that we can do and Oxford is a close bounded community. It's a university city, as you know. And there's a lot of interest that people have in sort of, say, you know, looking at other cultures and other art forms, let that be the student community or the teaching community. So there, first, I decided that, okay, let's try and see who are the other, could be the right partners in this and finding the right people who would be interested. So the idea initially was to do a festival, which we did. And thankfully, I found some people who were really keen on putting together a show. And though the focus was Odissi and it was called Oxford Odissi Festival, we did do other dance and music forms. So that was May, I think, 2015 that we first did a festival of that kind at Oxford. There was a lot of support from, the teachers and professors there, and even like the student community who were, the alums, so to speak. Yeah. And Nehru Center was also kind of supportive. So I think that was the foundation of what we know as Oxford Odissi Center. And now it has become the Oxford South Asian Center for Arts. And speaking about that, I think universities play a very big role in sort of opening up the gates for people, for students to learn and know about different art and art forms, right? And it's just not having workshops and not just doing, classes on a certain art form, but also letting people engage and have a conversation and continue that, right? The continuation part is something we struggle because, of course, when you are there for a certain number of years and then you move out of the university or the school, right? So you have to build a community, you have to have that network that allows you to continue the engagement with the right kind of people. So I think we got lucky and we had that kind of support. And therefore, I feel if we all come together and what we were trying to do is not just to popularize the art form, but also see how we can communicate with each other better with the art forms, right? So I think, yeah, exploring different modalities in that sense would help students to also engage better. And that's something that universities can do.
You've also very beautifully combined dance and diplomacy in your life, and so that gave birth to the second organization that was created by you, the Center for Peace and Performing Arts. How did that idea come forth, And I saw that CPPA works at the intersection of performing arts and track 1.5 diplomacy. What is track 1.5 diplomacy? If you could quickly explain that bit.
Yeah. So the idea of CPPA germinated in retrospect when I thought of how this came up. I think so. I started working with the UN initially with UNICEF and then with the World Food Program, and that gave me an opportunity to engage with communities from conflict-ridden or post-conflict settings. One of those communities, and I was also posted in different locations, conflict region areas, and one of those places that I was initially posted at was Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, where we even now we have the Rohingya refugee crisis ongoing, right? We have Rohingyas coming from Myanmar to Cox's, where they've taken refuge. So my work took me to the camps, which is a place where not many people can access. It was a big humanitarian response back then. And I just stumbled upon the musicians from Myanmar, the Burmese musicians, and they were just playing their own instruments and singing their songs just for them to come together and remember the good times that they have had, back home. And there was no agenda, no one was asking them to do it. And that was the first time I realized in a very different setting how music or art can get people together and how that is their ray of hope literally. Like we even now they're really stuck there, right? We're all, I mean, the government, everyone is trying to get them back home, or there's kind of a resolution that's been talked about, but nothing has happened so far. So they're still there, but in the sense of them having, a little bit of hope that they can, which gets them through, was their music, was their art form, right? So I think that was the first time I realized that art has, has different roles in different platforms, and how art can bring people together, can create cohesion, can enhance peace. So I think the CPPA idea came from there, and then I had opportunity to engage with communities in Afghanistan and also do pieces with them. So there was a Rohingya piece that I choreographed with the music that was recorded from the musicians themselves. So basically storytelling and taking the voices of the people out through the performing art forms. So so personally, that was a big influence. And then when I was in Rome for the very first time, and that too for work, I came across some people who were very much keen and passionate about performing arts and peace building. And that's when we sort of established the Center for Peace in Performing Arts. Now, talking about 1.5 dialogue or, negotiations, that's a very formal channel where a head of state speaks with another head of state, right? The peace negotiation that happens. So what we believe in, that there's a bigger role that art can play in those negotiations itself, and that has to be a bottom-up approach. The community themselves can come together through arts, and that can influence the policy makers, the decision makers. So when we talk about CPP, and I can expand later on this, we have 3 different pillars. We have the advocacy pillar, we have community engagement pillar, and we have research pillar. And the advocacy pillar brings the diplomats, brings the people from different forums together, who then, through the art forms, through choreographies that we present, through conversation that we have, are trying to engage with each other. So that's the Peace Festival for us, Peace Dialogue for us. And then the community engagement bit is where we go into the community and we try and understand what kind of activity, which is around performing arts, can bring communities together. Let that be, in some places a certain form of folk dance, in some other places theater, and it's kind of global in that nature, right? It can be in South Sudan to in Pakistan, in other places. And then the research is the core of it, which is where we have researchers. We look at different arenas in the performing arts and see how it can influence interaction, how it can create that space. So I think these are the sort of pillars that we look at, and that's where we believe very strongly that we can influence peace building in whatever small way possible with the stage that we are in with CPPA.
Right. And also, you mentioned that you choreographed a piece for the Rohingyas. So, when you're doing a piece like that, something that is not very traditional, probably does not involve the bhakti bhav in it, or does not involve the Hindu deities in it, what is the choreographic process like? How do you navigate between contemporary choreography versus traditional Odissi or any other Indian classical dance form?
I mean, so the language that I know in terms of performing arts is Odissi, right? So that's the vocabulary that I'm familiar with and I've learned all through my life so far. And even when I'm doing, so the very first time that I thought of um, doing choreography, it was with the intention of storytelling. That I want the story of the Rohingyas through their own voice to be presented to a global audience, which is what we did. And that would eventually, hopefully, bring people to understand what they are going through because it's their voice, their narrative. And I ideally wanted one of them to be the performer, but that was not possible because they couldn't go out of the camp. So I feel so that was the intention. And when I started thinking about it, I was like, Odyssey is the vocabulary I know. So my hand gestures, so everything would be Odyssey. I am very aware that I can't call it like a Odyssey choreography, and there's a lot of like things that we have to observe when it's a traditional Odissi choreography. But I think the emotions are the same because when you're a dancer, you are presenting yourself and you are telling a story or you are narrating, someone's story out there. You're trying to be that person. You're trying to be those people. So that intention remains the same as you do when you're doing a traditional Radha Krishna or you're doing any of the pieces from our texts, right? So the emotion remains the same, I feel. And when you embody something, you are giving yourself to that narrative. So I think that's where I personally as a performer wants to reach, where someone looking at me wouldn't be looking at me performing, but would see the character I'm doing, right? And these are not my words; these are words taken from the gurus. So who I am very inspired by. So I feel and I have only done those choreographies that I have come across in terms of the stories that I've come across, people I've spoken with. So if I'm very much involved or engaged in someone's life, the only way I know to express it, beside, of course, my voice, is my dance. So I think that is quite natural for me at this point. And the same happened with Afghanistan when I came across the women there and what they have gone through. Then I felt that there's something that I could do beside the work I'm already doing in the humanitarian sector, and that is to present this in a slightly different way through my dance, through their voice. So the music is always taken from that community itself. So in Afghanistan, I collaborated with the Afghan musicians, some of them being in Afghanistan, some of them based outside. And having spoken to those women, the voice though was mine, I couldn't record their voice because, of course, the political situation there. But the story, I try to make it as generic as possible. Of course, there are multiple nuances, but I've done 20 minutes pieces so far, and I try and capture as much as the reality possible. So I think it's quite a long process, but I feel like I'm very much invested in it. So somehow it gets balanced with my work otherwise. It's a beautiful process. Yeah.
I can imagine that. So you're a full-time diplomat, you're a professional Odissi dancer, and you also run your own NGO, the CPPA. What does a typical day in your life look like? I mean, how do you manage to wear all these three hats?
Um, yeah, I mean, um, like a typical day when so at this point, of course, I'm traveling and I took a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
So now, if I look at a typical day when I'm doing my work full time and work as in I have to be in the office and there's a lot of stuff happening there. And then the dance practice and CPPA, I feel like no 2 days look the same. But of course, when I am in the field, which is, the places where we have our field operation, that would be a Bangladesh, or the headquarters are in Rome for WFP, and everywhere else is our field operation where we have a conflict or a situation, right? So when you're in the field, there's no regular working hours. It can go up till late at night. So I think those are the times when it becomes difficult to manage my practice sessions. CPPA literally happens, anytime and every time I'm off work, that's when CPPA is happening. And even during that, so I think I squeeze in so far. It requires a lot more time going forward, I realized, but so far it's been just, I run literally 2 schedules, and that's one for work and one for CPPA. So I think balancing that has been something I've learned over the years. Of course, initially there's a lot of struggle when there's a lot of commitments for work and a lot of commitments for CPPA. So I learned how to delegate better, how to manage time better. So I think that has been a journey in itself. But yeah, what I struggle a little bit, and I don't want to act like, oh, I'm like master of everything, is my dance practice. And therefore, when I have a break, and I consciously take my breaks so that I can practice, I can give that much time to dance. And as you know, for our stage performances, you need that much of, rehearsal and stamina if you're doing solo performances. And that's what I hope I can do more and more, because with the travel and everything, that also is something that I haven't been doing as much as I'd love to, because I have done quite a few, but it's it's a work in progress. I would say there's a lot more that I could do better.
Yeah. But I think you're doing it well. I was at the Delhi Peace Festival and it was fabulous. I just loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's taken a lot of crazy working.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you started off by answering this question by saying, you're on a break, but you weren't on a break. You were just working very hard. I wanted to understand, as someone who's also has a background in policy and is also an artist, in your experience, are policymakers genuinely receptive to an artistic intervention for certain policy ideas, or is it still viewed as something, this will take place in the opening ceremony or this will take place in the closing ceremony? It's just there for the entertainment bit. Has the outlook to it changed?
That's a very good question. I think so. I'm also very much conscious while every time I try and explain what we do with CPPA. Initially, I was like, oh, art has a higher purpose, and we are trying to bridge the gap, and it's just not for quote unquote entertainment. So later on, I realized entertainment is as important as what we're doing, the messaging part. And they both can come together. You don't have to choose one, right? People have to first, if you're presenting something which is performance, they have to somehow come and sit there. And for that, maybe you have to do the generic part, which you might not be willing to do because, okay, you're socially inclined. It's the same as we have the conversation with movies, right? Should they be only like entertainment movies, or there should be social messaging movies, whatever? So I feel with arts, I think we have reached a point, there's a long way to go, firstly. And you're right that many times, especially in our context in India, I've seen that it's generally, we are showing our culture, diversity and everything, and it's the end, closing ceremony or the inauguration part where we have the presentations. But that's also kind of important when it comes to diplomacy and that soft power and everything, right? So that has a big role. But I feel we have at least moved a few inches down the road where we can say, okay, there is engagement from the policymaker side. There are places I've seen in, diplomatic spaces, and I was also someone who performed at the World Bank Summit last year, where there's a conversation happening around a certain social or a certain, conflict or peace issue because of the the performance and performing arts is driving it.
Yeah.
So I think it plays a role, but there's a long way to go in that sense. It's still not, there's only so much, of course, performing arts can do. But we haven't reached anywhere close to saying that, okay, it has a bigger influence, right? It's just a part of the conversation. I feel performers need to be and artists need to be a part of that dialogue in some or the other way. It might not be at the very decision making stage, but at through the process, they have to be engaged because they themselves represent what is happening at the bottom level, what's happening at the community level, because that's where art is involved, and every time you see there is a shift in power, art plays a bigger role. Let that be theater, let that be, visual art. It has a bigger role to play because it influences people, it brings people together, or it can separate people as well. It has a divider and a connector role that it plays. So I feel there's a long way to go, but we have certainly made progress. I mean, as being a performer for over 20, 25 years now, where we started, I feel there's a lot more that we are doing. We had the SARCs or the BRICS are not only seeing cultural performances happening and it's the end of it. I think there is a part of the committee that also decides, okay, we will have an engagement about culture where the cultural ambassadors will also come together. Yeah. So yeah, and I therefore think with CPPA we are trying to bring those key people in the arts together with the policymakers so that we help bridge the gap even further. And we need more of those spaces. Like if we have a Delhi Peace Festival, we would also have a peace dialogue, which is where we would bring those conversations or the narratives that we had in the Peace Festival to the dialogue, and we'll bring people who can make a connection and take the conversation forward. Yeah, but I would say it's there's a long way that we have to go, and we have to do it together. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that one day it does play a bigger role in it. Thank you so much for the conversation today, Vaishali. It was very fresh, insightful. Thank you. Thank you for being here.